Well, hey there. Welcome to the Church Growth Interviews podcast. My name is Bart Blair, and I am here with my friend and the CEO of Missional Marketing, Jason Hamrock. How's it going today, Jason?
It is going well, Bart. I can't complain. Yep.
Now, I have to comment on the fact that you're wearing a hoodie, a sweater today. Is it cold in Phoenix?
You know, I'm in Phoenix. It's March, and this is a really rare season for us because it's actually chilly. And we have clouds. If you live in Phoenix, this clouds are very rare around here. So it's kind of nice to be able to see clouds today.
What's chilly? Describe chilly.
Mid 60s. It's cold.
Okay. Okay. So for our friends that are listening in Minneapolis or the Northeast, that's not chilly. They'd probably love to have temperature in the 60s.
They would. I have such weak. My blood is really thin, and I'm just a wimp.
Okay, we'll document that. I can probably take that into a little short video clip, make the meme of Jason. I'm just a wimp. Hey, speaking of weather, so get this. I'm in Texas. I'm in the Dallas area, and this is springtime. So this is like severe weather time for us. So last night, it's funny. My wife, Elizabeth, loves storm season. I don't know what it is. She's terrified of bears, which is like this totally irrational fear because where we live, there are no bears. But she's not afraid of tornadoes. I'm not quite sure why she's not afraid of tornadoes. So when we start getting these severe weather alerts and things, like she runs outside. She's one of those people standing in the backyard, looking at the lightning, looking for the tornado. And last night we've got the news on, and all of a sudden, we're getting some weather reports, and down the street from us, the tornado sirens went off. It started fired off. So we grabbed Silas. He was upstairs in his room, and we ran down and we're tucked into the hall closet, sitting there with the dog. Okay, this is the real deal. We've got the tornado sirens, and they went for 2 minutes, and then they went off, and we went back and checked the news again, and there was a tornado warning in the next county. But it never really formulated into anything significant, but it was kind of adventurous. Speaking of weather, it's that time of year.
That's rare for you guys there in March, to have that kind of severe weather with.
March, April. Well, we're almost in April at the time that we're recording this, right? So it is that springtime when we start getting those. I'm not a meteorologist, so I don't understand it, but I guess you get these high pressure, low pressure, warm temperature, cold temperature things kind of hitting each other, and it causes updrafts and twisting, and I don't know, all kinds of crazy stuff.
Well, wherever you are in the world, we hope your weather is just fine.
Yeah, let's hope that you are not hiding in a closet somewhere as you listen to this podcast.
Not good.
Hey, so Jason, we're coming up on pretty close to a year since we launched this podcast. I think it's safe to say that the year that we've just been through, a lot of the content and the topics of the podcast were very different than what we had expected and hoped when we started, because we had no idea when we planned this thing out last spring that COVID was probably going to occupy the majority of our podcast content. But now we're at the day that we're recording this, we're kind of wrapping up. We're almost at the end of March, first quarter of the year. And I wanted to ask you a question. After the last year, and as we've gotten through the first quarter, we're kind of coming up on Easter as we're recording this. What's been something that's been encouraging to you that you've seen in the local church kind of coming out of 2020 and into 2021?
One thing that's been really encouraging for me is the throwing away of sacred cows. And what I mean by that is I think we, as the church in North America, in the United States, we've been so focused on driving people to our building. And if we just get them in the building, then we can minister to them. And COVID put a stop to that in a heartbeat. And I think that was one of the best things that could happen to the church, because it forced leaders to think differently about how you do ministry, how do you disciple, how do you reach people. And that means instead of making them come to us, we go to them. We go to them digitally and meet people where they are in the muck of what they're in life, and we can speak to them. And if you think about that, that's what Jesus did 2,000 years ago. This is what he did. He didn't say, "Come to me." He came to us. And so for me, I think that was probably a huge turning point for churches. And a lot of churches rallied behind that with resources, with their people, with their money, and they invested into what they know is going to be the new normal. And that is, you're not throwing your building away by any means, but you're thinking differently about how to do ministry, and it really is a lot of it's online.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. We've had several guests on the podcast here in the last few weeks. Jim Tomberlin, one of them, talking about the fact that, we used to think that without a building, we had no revenue, that all of our offerings came as a result of having a building. And obviously that's one of the things that we've learned is very different. We're going to introduce our guest for this episode here in just a minute. It's a guy named Phil Bowdle, who's the creative arts pastor at Westridge Church in Dallas, Georgia, the little Dallas. I'm in the big Dallas. He's in the little Dallas. But we were offline with him yesterday when we recorded this. And one of the things that I said that I was really encouraged by coming into to the end of the first quarter was at this time last year, there was a real sense of panic in the local church. I think both Jim Tomberlin and Dale Sellers, in the episodes they've been on with us, both of them made the statement that, COVID-19 didn't create as many problems for the church as much as it did exposed problems that we had in the church. And that exposure really caused a lot of panic. There was just this time last year, it was like, are we doing Easter? Or are we not doing Easter? Are we ever going to get back in our building? Or are we not getting back in our building? Right. And this year, even though there's still a whole lot of unknown and people are really not sure how, 2021 is going to fully play out, our experience has been, especially as we've been connecting with churches here in preparation for Easter and helping them with their digital outreach campaigns and their marketing campaigns, is that churches are moving at a much more purposeful pace. Mm-hmm. There's not the panic. There's not the knee jerk. There's not we just got to throw a whole bunch of stuff at the wall and see what sticks. They're being much more strategic and much more methodical in their approach. And that's been really encouraging for me, because things are going to continue to change. Like we're not, the new normal we say is the new normal, and the new normal might last 2 or 3 months before we find ourselves facing another normal, a different normal, right? And so I think one of the big lessons that we've learned as a church is that slow and steady wins the race, that, these knee-jerk reactions or overreactions, overcorrecting doesn't serve us well. It doesn't serve our people well. It certainly doesn't serve the kingdom well. And so that's been an encouragement for me.
Yeah. Well, one encouragement for me is God is still in control, and God is in control of those who are in control. God is in control. And, regardless of what's going to come at us, this is his church and we're his people. And I think what kind of came to light, I think a lot of people, and rightfully so, you're a little nervous, right? Churches are going, oh, is giving going to stay consistent or is it going to drop? I mean, what's going to happen here? Of course, last year, we also had that little thing called an election, and it, all that stuff that's going on in our country, it caused some panic. And, we're humans. And I think that was something that was probably natural. But as you were saying, this season right now that we're in, we're right before Easter right now. Of course, when you hear this, it's going to be after Easter. A lot of churches are like kind of breathing a sigh of relief. Okay, cool. All right. Giving is still strong. In fact, some churches, it's gone up. That means our people are more dedicated. And we can still do ministry. I sit back and go, yeah, because God's in control. So don't freak out and think ahead and plan. And I think churches have been doing that. I know they've been doing that. So it's pretty exciting for, in my opinion, what's going to be happening here the rest of 2021 and into the future is, we serve a great God who loves us. He cares about us. It's his church. And we just get to follow in his footsteps.
Yeah, that's very, very well said. Well, we should probably go ahead and introduce. I kind of introduced the guest already. Phil Bowdle, the creative arts pastor at Westridge Church. Westridge Church is a church of about 3,000 to 4,000 people in attendance pre-pandemic. I don't know if he told us how they're doing these days in terms of their attendance, but really encouraged by the ministry that they're doing there. Phil leads a large team of creatives and communications people, and he's also the author of a book called Rethinking Church Communication. And we're going to unpack a little bit from that book in the conversation that we had with him yesterday. And so without any further delay, let's get to that interview with Phil Baudel.
Well, hey, Phil, welcome to the podcast. Glad to have you on board today. How's it going?
It's going great. Thrilled to be here with you guys.
Yeah, thrilled to have you. And I'm excited about this podcast today because we're going to dive in a little bit to a book you wrote and I want to learn a little bit more about who you are, what God's been doing through you and through your ministry. And so share with our audience who you are and a little bit of your background.
Sure. Yeah. Well, my favorite role and job title is dad. So I get to be dad to a 6-year-old Ethan and 2-year-old Ava Joy, and love that, being able to do that with my wife Sarah. And we live out here in Northwest Atlanta, in Dallas, Georgia, little Dallas.
Okay.
Yeah, for sure. So, but have been out here. It's not home for us. I grew up in Cincinnati, Ohio. My dad's a pastor out there, so I'm one of the PKs that survived, I guess, and made it. So I've been a church kid my whole life. Been on the front pew or front row since day one. And so yeah, I went, a lot of my growing up days were figuring out what could I do in the creative space. And I didn't necessarily see that being in the church, because the church space wasn't always that creative, but God continued to, as I said no more and more, God had other plans. And so I went to school to study media communications, thinking I'd be in a, ad agency or run a company or something like that, in that kind of space. And God's just continued to use things all the way from early ministry on to be able to help shape me to do what I do now. And so I've been at Westridge Church for almost 11 years. I can't believe that.
Wow.
So I started off as communications director, came in really just to help build and create the communications team. So we were like a lot of churches that just had no system, structure, resources, team. My team meeting was me closing the door and, figuring it out and stuff. So it was a lot of building and a lot of lessons learned through that phase. And so it served in that role for about 4.5 years, and then moved into our creative arts pastor role. And so I've been in that role ever since then. So get to serve with and lead an incredible team of creatives. So for us, that's our worship, production, video, communications. And our thing at the end of the day is we love tech just like everybody. We love gear, all that we get into songs and guitars and all that stuff. But our thing more than anything is we just want to put Jesus on display and put him in the spotlight. So I get to be able to just be a part of that through our team and help us try to do that as well as we can.
Wow. So you've here we are. We're in March of 2021. We're kind of coming out of this last year, which is, the church world was turned upside down. You guys have navigated through that. What kind of things are you doing today that you had no idea you'd be doing a year ago? Like, there's just it's crazy. How have you responded?
Yeah. I'm one of those crazy people that I wasn't excited for this by any means, but at the same time, when this all started to happen, I remember thinking back to a meeting I was having with my team, and we were sitting around, and I was saying, hey, we may need to be ready for a couple of weeks to just be online. And they were like, you're crazy. What are you talking about? And I was crazy to think just a couple of weeks, So, there's no way to be prepared for all this, but at the same time, it was kind of energizing, partly for what I get to do. Cause I wrote a book on rethinking communication, largely with a lot of this stuff in mind, not a pandemic in mind, but with the mindset of how do we reach people physically and digitally and help put Jesus on display in both worlds. And seeing all these new opportunities, that part was really energizing. So it's led to some really great conversations with leadership, with repositioning how we're doing some things, just to be more intentional with how we're actually reaching people when they go to church in person and as they go out in the community and as they engage with us in person and online. So I feel like we were having the right conversations before, but it prepared us to be able to jump right in and say, how do we take it up another level and get really intentional? But the thing that I'm actually most excited about for our team as a whole is there's just another level of awareness, I think, of how the student ministry, the kids ministry, women's ministry, every ministry has a role to play. And they may have not signed up for to be an online minister, but they are one now. Because if God called them to reach people, if you're a women's ministry leader and God called you to reach women, he's also called you to reach them online, because that's where they are. And that doesn't mean you have to leave them there, but it means you have to reach them there and stuff. So the hunger of not only people in our church, but churches all across the country to say, hey, I want to make sure that I'm not that I'm leveraging this season, not wasting it, has been really energizing and exciting.
Well, so you wrote this book, Rethink Communication, I think 2018?
Beginning of 2019 is when it
2019
technically released. Yeah,
timely. When you think about Rethink Communication, what inspired you to write this book? I mean, what prompted this?
Yeah, well, so like I mentioned earlier, my first couple of years in communications were I learned a ton, but most of it was learning it the hard way, and learning it on the fringes of burnout. And so for me, the biggest thing was I see myself in so many other leaders across the country that are saying, hey, we don't know where to start. Like, I didn't get trained in this. I didn't go to school for this. There was no playbook, out there. And so that was my heart. So I just wanted to kind of create a playbook from the things that I've learned to give you a way to be able to help communicate anything that your church is communicating. And the other piece was I really wanted to do that with the senior pastor and ministry leaders in mind. It sounds like a bad joke, but like if you pictured a senior pastor, a ministry leader, and a communications leader sitting down at a bar or a coffee shop. I mean, like that's kind of what I had in my mind. Is I wanted something that everybody could lean into together to figure out what's changed in the church and how do we need to change as the church to communicate the greatest message ever. Well,
I mean, we get the opportunity to talk to a lot of churches around the country, and you can imagine we talk from everybody from lead pastors down to the new communication director who was just a children's ministry assistant last month, but she got the short end of the stick, and now she's the communication director. I mean, that literally happens, and they step in that space and they're like, okay, where do we begin? Because they're gifted, they're talented, and they're good leaders, but again, they have no idea.
And sometimes it's just who has a Mac on staff. Okay, you're the communications director. Pretty much.
Does anybody here know Photoshop?
You're cool.
Yeah. If you've ever used Photoshop before, you might be the communications director.
Pretty much.
That's kind of where it goes.
Well,
hey, let me ask you a question on the note of the playbook. Jay, you talked a little bit about the playbook. Jason talked about the book Rethink Communication. One of the things that you do in the book is you kind of describe very accurately what a lot of communications directors live in, which is you just call it chaos, right? It's chaos. It's early mornings, it's late nights, it's a whole lot of spinning plates. You're in a large church, and when you're in a large church and there are a lot of different ministries and a lot of different departments, it's a lot to take in. And we have conversations with these types of communications directors and leaders all the time, and they're always working to try to figure out how to prioritize my time and the things that I'm focused on. The urgent always seems to trump everything else because everybody's need is super urgent. And so you kind of paint this picture of chaos, which I think anybody who reads the book who's living in the communications space in a church is going to go, yep, that's where I am, or at least that's where I've been. That's me, right? And then you actually kind of break things down into some steps as far as a playbook is concerned. You want to just kind of walk through maybe just some of the highlights of those things that you would coach someone on to say, if you're living in this chaos, these are a few little nuggets that would help you kind of prioritize your time and prioritize the energies that you're putting into communications.
Yeah, great question. I think, this is a great time, I think, for churches to lean into this, because I think at the beginning of COVID, you had the excuse of, hey, we don't know what next 2 days are going to look like, so we can't plan. And a lot of churches have created a year-long rhythm of that. And there are communication leaders out there everywhere that are at the end of their rope, burned out. So it's a great time to have these questions if you're in that communications role or you're leading that, especially if you're leading or overseeing those people. Lean into this. So I think in the book I walk through the playbook, from beginning to end of how do you think through and clarify that message before you start communicating it, and how do you effectively build a plan, all that stuff. So that's there, but the for you to check out if you'd like. But I think that the number one game changer thing for me that was clarifying and clarifying for me as a leader, but also clarifying for our church, is we stopped trying to make everything important. When everything's important, nothing's important.
Nothing is.
And when you try to put the burden on a communications person or a church to say, make all of this stuff known and communicate it all, you're talking about an impossible task, because most people don't always think or realize that for somebody to take a next step to respond to a message, it usually takes about 7 interactions with that message before somebody makes a response. So if you're trying to communicate 5 things on a Sunday, think about how difficult that is for that message to actually stick, because people are tuning out. So the number one thing that I would try to encourage churches to do is to pick for each week of the year, what are the 1 to 2 most important messages from your church? And then make sure that that's really clear, and then leverage your communication channels all across the board, in person and online, and digital stuff, to be able to help tell the story of what God's doing through that message. And that may be a new sermon series, that may be a new service time, that may be a giving initiative, any number of messages. But if it's not more important than those 1 to 2 things, then it probably needs to be communicated in a different way, or in a more niche way. In that way, instead of trying to be more important than the other stuff. So when you as a church can clarify that, you give your communications team and creative team the greatest clarity to be able to say, put all your creative energy into these things,
right?
Knock it out of the park. Make sure that you are really effectively not just getting the job done and making that task get completed, but really you're saying, how do I creatively tell this story in a unique way on social media, and how do we leverage this message in service? How do we use email and our app to be able to help people engage in these things? They can't do it if you're giving them 8 things, but if you give them 1 to 2, you'll be amazed by the creative energy that gets put into it, and the clarity that happens for the people you're trying to reach when you're not giving them a whole menu of things to engage with.
When I think you get burned out by that, right? I mean, as a staff person, it's overwhelming, and all of a sudden we are turning into counselors, trying to counsel them through that, and almost their therapist rather than giving them ideas. And I think that's the biggest. Yeah, I see it all the time. That's the biggest. If you guys are doing that to your team, please stop.
Well, and there's staffs that are so burned out and tired from trying to play this event cycle. And think about, if you're burned out as a full-time staff member, think about the burden that we're trading all that work that we're not willing to do of trying to create clarity for the people we're trying to reach. And we're putting that on the shoulders of the people that we want to engage in these very things called in the church. So we got to do the hard work to clarify it so that we're not putting all that baggage on the people we're trying to reach.
Hi, Bart Blair here. I'm the producer of Missional Marketing's Church Growth Interviews podcast. On behalf of our entire team, we really appreciate you tuning in. Let me ask you a question. If you're a church leader or a church communications professional, do you know how Google sees your church website? In other words, if people in your community were to Google churches near me, or best church in my city, or good church nearby, do you know where your church website would show up in those search results? At the top maybe, or somewhere in the middle, or somewhere on page 4? There's a common misunderstanding that if we simply build a great website and we launch it, that Google will somehow work its magic and people will find us online. But there's a bit more art and science to making sure that your church website shows up in the top of those search results. And that science is called local SEO, or local search engine optimization. And at Missional Marketing, local SEO is one of the core services that we provide for churches all across the United States and Canada. We'd love to help you. If you'd like to learn more, click to our website at missionalmarketing.com and follow the link at the top of the page that says Church SEO. You can request a free local SEO report to see how your church is showing up in Google these days, and you can schedule an appointment to talk with Jason or with me or with one of our other digital strategists to help you decide whether or not a local SEO boost is right for your church. Hey, again, we appreciate you tuning into our podcast, and we look forward to the opportunity to serving you in your church and reaching more people for Jesus. Now, back to the show. I'm gonna ask you a question. I'm gonna ask both of you the same question. I'm gonna let Phil answer it first because he's our guest. But both of you, like Jason, spent a number of years as a communications director in a large multi-campus church. Phil, you're in a large church. There's lots of ministry. You've got lots of staff. One of the things that you said just a minute ago is, okay, as a lead team, I'm kind of summarizing here. As a lead team, we're going to prioritize the things that are basically going to get our A1, tier 1, high level vision space. Like this is getting platform time on Sunday morning. This is getting prime spot on the website and in social media. But I'm another staff member in the church, and maybe I'm coming from the men's ministry or the children's ministry or the prayer ministry, and I have something that's important, something that I think everybody ought to know about, or an event or an activity that I really want to promote. How are you going to coach me on how I can best use my resources to communicate what I need to the people that I want to hear my message? How would you communicate? How would you basically say, no, we're not going to give you the time and the space that you want, but here's how I can help you more effectively communicate to the people you need to communicate to?
Yeah, great question. And I think that's the tension every ministry leader has. And it's an important, like we need hungry, passionate ministry leaders that are fighting for that very thing. That's way better than a bunch of people that don't care if anybody is engaging with it. So I'll take that problem all day long. I mean, there's two strategies I think that are important for this. Neither of them happen overnight, but they have to be fought for over time to be able to be effective. So one thing is, every ministry area, if it's important enough to invest in as a church, it's important enough to have a key on-ramp way for people to engage in that ministry all throughout the year. And so if you're now, does that mean that you give it attention every single week? No, you probably can't. But like, for example, our kids ministry, a very, very important ministry in our church. Do we talk about the family movie night or the kind of one-off events all the time? We really don't. We try to equip that ministry with the tools they need to most effectively reach their tribe of people. But what we try to do as a church, and as we communicate all across the year, is when we are approaching their key on-ramp ministry, which is their summer camp, we go all out. I mean, we spend 3 to 4 weeks of that being our most important or our second most important message. And we creatively tell the story of what God's doing through our kids camp. And as people hear about that and engage in that, we know that if they take a next step to get engaged in that camp, now they are in our database, they're in our tribe, they've given us permission to kind of connect with them and engage with them. And they're involved in our ministry now. So now kids ministry can help drive that targeted communication to them all across the year. So giving each ministry an on-ramp time is really important because it gives them that church-wide promotion and awareness for everybody. But it allows them to leverage that as a jumping off point to make sure that they're leveraging that all across the year. The second thing I alluded to is just making sure as ministry leaders, we are partners with them. As communication leaders, we need to partner with them all throughout the year to make sure that they have the resources they need to be able to take the mantle on of effectively communicating their ministry. Because their most effective way to do that is not from putting up a pre-service slide. It's their network, it's their relationships, it's their social media posts. They want to connect with that. Like the people that want to come to that event, they want to connect with that. So we just need to give them the tools and resources, and put things up on the website and make sure they have a good central hub for people to stay connected on that stuff. But we've got to partner with them all throughout the year to make sure that they've got the resources they need to help tell the story of their ministry.
Jason, I want to know what you want to add to that, because my perception, Jason, is that when you were leading in your church, you loved to say no to people. Like, that's the perception that I have. Jason, I think, took pride in saying, no, you're not getting what you are asking for. So I may
because I think if you start to say yes all the time, then you create a bad habit of ministries thinking that you're going to be the one communications department that's going to make my event successful. And that's just impossible to live up to that reality every single week in and week out with all these different ministries. So I not only do I echo and I believe exactly what Phil just said, that through storytelling and through equipping and giving them the tools necessary and the boundaries, these are the boundaries. If it doesn't reach the whole room, we're not going to mention it in worship, but we're going to give you the tools. The only thing I would add on to this is I would also try to educate the ministry that this isn't it's a reverse funnel. Okay. A normal funnel is we want to reach everybody and try to get the message out to everybody, knowing that we're going to funnel down to the people that are going to get connected to our church or our ministry. In this case, you want to reverse that. You want to target that small group that's really passionate about what you are doing as a ministry, and through them it grows and it reaches more and more and more people, because that's your passionate people, your tribe. And you said that perfectly. That's going to help grow your tribe. Get away from, I got to have thousands of people. Remove the number. It's all about change lives. It's all about storytelling. It's about reaching a group of people that eventually will continue to grow. And of course, as ministries, as you know, throughout the years, there's different seasons in these families' lives. Bart and I were just talking, we are in a different season than Phil is. Phil's got younger kids. We've got older kids. We're just in different seasons. And that happens constantly through the life of the church. And so the best way to equip ministries now is to use storytelling and use these tools to engage people and understand there's a reverse funnel in that. So
I think that's really well said. And I want to piggyback on that. One of the things when we talk to churches about their digital outreach strategies, their digital marketing, the way that they're reaching people in their community, Jason and I always qualify every conversation we have with every church by saying, there is no amount of money that you can spend, and there is no marketing that you can do that will trump the personal invitation of the people in your church, inviting their friends, their family, their neighbors, period. Yep. The personal invitation goes back 2,000 years to Jesus's personal invitation. And that's what we need to be doing. And that's what we need to be championing in our churches. I think sometimes, even in the context of our ministries, we fail to realize that is still, even in the context of the men's ministry, the women's ministry, the prayer team, the children's ministry, that word of mouth marketing, that personal invitation is still the most valuable asset that any ministry leader has. Is find the people that are evangelists for your ministry and for your cause and for what you're trying to do, get them excited about it. If they're excited about it, and they understand the vision of what you're trying to accomplish, then you're more likely to have more successful events and activities and engagement in what you're doing, because they're going to share the love. They're going to spread it around to the people that need to know. So I just kind of add to that there, Jason. Hey, let's pivot to another question here, Phil. Actually, I'm going to kind of go back to the book and ask another question. You wrote the book right, a year and a half, 2 years prior to the whole COVID thing. Is there anything that you would add to the book today in light of what your experience over the last year has been?
Great question. I mean, there's always time for a second book, which I'm trying to work through. Weren't for just trying to survive the season 2. So yeah, a lot of things that I think are phase 2 or a different aspect of, especially the digital side of engaging people. But I think probably the biggest missed opportunity that I think needs to be rethinked for church leaders is that the old way of thinking about discipling people was get them to our event, get them to our gathering, and then then they'll take the steps and they'll be discipled. Which is it's not that can't happen, but what I think the missed opportunity is is there's a lot of people that are overwhelmed with all the noise that are being thrown at them, that they're not coming to that event because they don't know it adds value to them or to their family or to their marriage. So what if instead of just waiting for people to come to us, we actually said, hey, what are these little aspects of, what are these for marriage, for example, instead of just saying, hey, we have a marriage event for you, or a weekly gathering for your marriage to make sure that we can help you with taking your marriage to the next level. So come here and you'll be better. Like, that's one model. The other model would be, hey, this is the story of this person who has just finished up our marriage, our weekly marriage event. And here's the 3 things that were game changers for their marriage. These are 3 things they took away that you can use and apply right now. And that can be a 60-second, 90-second video. That can be a blog post. That can be a social media post. It gives them value where they are, and it gives them a next step. And so I think that's what's being missed, is we're making sure we are requiring people to take the next step of, which is more like a leap, to get people inside the door, to come in person, to come to that event, to take their time to do that. When instead, if we gave them small steps and added value wherever we're communicating our message, online, on our website, on our live streams, all those things, give them value where they are, and then give them a next step. That's where I think we've got to be leaning into this, because we have the greatest message and we have some of the greatest opportunities out there to help people and actually add value to their lives, to make their lives better, because we believe that Jesus makes our lives better. Like, we're better people and better husbands and wives and kids and all those things when we have Jesus at the center of our life. So if we believe that, we need to get that message in front of as many people as we can and give them that value where they are, so that they lean in and take a next step.
Yeah, I would echo that to say, I don't think the strategy of bringing them into the room is still going to be there, right? It took a pause for a while here, and we'll get back to that a little bit. But to your point, and something we should have been doing for years, is we should be meeting them in their space, on their time, with content that makes it's relevant to what they're dealing with, right? You just mentioned it, like, watch some videos of success stories on how this couple fixed their marriage, right? Which gives you hope that you can experience that. And you didn't have to come to the room for that. You could do it in your own living room. And that's just a baby step. Discipleship starts right there. And eventually, if they want to, they'll take those steps to come to our church, right, and engage. But if we could just reproduce that over and over and over again, now it's limitless on how many people we can reach on all these different felt needs. So I totally echo and appreciate what you said there, that we can't just have this one-minded shift to go, we got to get them in the room. That's fine, but we have to, and you guys have pivoted well, you got to go to them, because that's what Jesus did. He didn't make people come to him. He went to people. He came down to earth to come to us. Yeah. And we have to take the same approach.
Just like you said, I mean, we did not see Jesus, walking the streets, meeting people and say, hey, great question, person, or I see that you need that healing. Hey, can I give you this postcard to come to this gathering that we've got? Make sure, no, he met needs right there. And then he gave them a next step. He said, go and sin no more, or go here. Yeah. Like, he gave them a next step. So we're just following what Jesus's model here, but we just missed, we got the gathering part. We just missed the first step sometimes along the way. And that can be the most fun, because then it takes the burden off of us. We're not our win is not that we got people inside a room, because life transformation may or may not happen if they get in that room. But what we can just do is be faithful in putting Jesus on display in all those different avenues, and then let Jesus do what he said he's going to do. And he said he's going to build the church. So that's not on us, but we just got to be faithful in all this other stuff.
Hey, Phil, who are the leaders that you're looking to and that you're learning from these days? I do want to point out that, when I discovered your book, I saw that Tony Morgan had written the foreword. So I'm like, well, this guy Phil's in some good company. And then when I went to Amazon to buy it, I saw an endorsement from John Maxwell, who said he read the book. And I'm like, okay, like, Phil's in some good company here. So you got, Tony Morgan and John Maxwell, who are phenomenal leaders and people that I'm learning from. Aside from those guys, which I assume that you learn from those guys, who are some other people that you're looking to and learning from that might be a benefit to us and to our listeners?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, leaders authors that I really lean into just because I appreciate how they approach problems are Seth Godin, Adam Grant, Malcolm Gladwell. I love their work, and I love their podcasts as well. I'm a podcast junkie. So other podcasts in the faith space or leadership space too, Andy Stanley, Carey Nieuwhof, Craig Rochelle, they're very practical and insightful on that. Those are probably not new names for a lot of people, but what I think I've been leaning into more in this season is I'm more interested in leaning into the faithful leaders behind the scenes that you may not know about. That they don't have a Twitter account, they don't have a blog or a book or anything like that. They're just being faithful with their church of 100 or their specific role that God's called them to. So I have a friend, Mac Lake, who's just a leadership expert. And when I have a problem in that area or just want to learn from him, I'm going to him. Tim Foote, who I also do some work with Slingshot Group. And so he is the most encouraging guy I've ever met. Like he's just oozes encouragement. You feel better when you talk to that guy. So I'm trying to ask him questions and learn from him, and especially in that area, to lean into that. And there's just volunteers that are on our team or our staff that have a unique gift that I can learn from. So I think sometimes we overthink it. Like there's great leaders out there, but there's great leaders that are just faithful behind the scenes that nobody knows about that I'm learning from every day.
Well said. Yeah, I think we're rubbing shoulders with people, and we maybe take that for granted a little bit. And you recognize, wait a minute, you really are pouring into my life. And it's not always like, hey, you just gave me 5 nuggets to chew on that I'm going to improve my leadership. It's more about just through life. You're going, wait, what's God telling me in this moment right now? Yeah. I find that happen all the time because I'm the same way. You surround yourself with people that you just like to be around, and you find that God does some amazing things through those relationships. And it's pretty fun. I mean,
especially in the last, couple of years, I mean, the interesting thing that I see from the generation older than me is that they had some incredible giants of the faith that they could look to and count on, that they could model their lives around and be in good shape. My generation has had a lot of people that look that way, but have let us down. Like that they've had fail, and none of us are beyond failure on that. I don't mean that at all, but platform and follower counts don't necessarily mean the greatest influence either, because that can let us down. So I just think we've got to look in other places sometimes. And especially, like I said, lean into things that find a trait or find somebody that's great, even at one thing, and just ask them questions, spend time with them, learn from them. That's where it's at.
Yeah, I think you're describing inadvertently. You're describing Jason Hamrock. He's the guy who hasn't written a book. I don't think you have a Twitter account, do you?
No, I don't.
but someone that I've learned a ton from, and I think a lot of the leaders and a lot of church communications professionals and pastors and executive pastors that Jason gets to spend time with. I'm tooting your horn here for you, Jason, so you don't have to. Not that you would. See, that's another reason reason you're a good leader is that you wouldn't do that. So. It's cool. You're absolutely right, Phil. There is something very, we do live in a culture of the cult of personality, right? Where, we do tend to look to people who have large platforms, and they oftentimes have very valuable and insightful things to say. And, and I'm one of those people. I like you. I listen to a lot of podcasts. It sounds like you and I probably listen to a lot of the same podcasts, but there is a danger in, hitching your wagon or putting all of your eggs into some of those baskets, because people are people and they do fail and they do fall. And we just need to keep our anchor in Jesus Christ, the King. He's the one. Yep. He's the one. Yep. And I don't know how we kind of delved into this.
Well, I listen to his podcast all the time.
You listen to his podcast? Yeah. I do too. Yeah. I spend some time every morning. Some weird guy, if I, use the Bible app and you got some strange guys, reading it to me in the Bible app, I I don't think that's what Jesus sounds like, but anyway. Hey, let's wrap up here, Phil. We really, really appreciate your time. This has been really, really great to get to know you and a little bit more about your ministry. I think that your book is really an excellent tool for communications professionals, for pastors, for people who are trying to figure out how to really streamline their processes and be more effective in their communication. At the end of the day, we have a message that we need to communicate. I think one of the things that you hit on in the book is that we don't have a problem with our message. We have a problem with our delivery mechanism. I don't know if that's exactly the way you phrase it, but those are kind of the words that you use. Close enough. It's not the message, it's the delivery of the message. And we need to get better at that. So appreciate the work that you've put into not only doing it at Westridge, but also, making your experiences and your insights available to other people. If people would like to get a copy of the book, find out more about you, what are the best ways for them to connect with you, to track with you, or to get the book?
Sure. Yeah. You can go to rethinkcommunicationbook.com, search my name or Rethink Communication in Amazon. That's where most people are grabbing the book on there, but there's links for all the different places you can find it, or to get bulk copies for your team. If you're walking through the book with your team, we try to make that really competitive with the publisher to be able to make that a good option for your team. So feel free to check that out. Also, you can text me 678-653-2047. If you have a question, if I can pray for you, if there's anything I can do to have your back, feel free to reach out there, 678-653-2047. I leave it in the end of the book as well too, and I've had some really fun. That's how John Maxwell called me. So I'm like, worth it just for that, So I'll take it. But feel free to reach out. I've had some really fun conversations with people from churches all over the place from that. So love being able to connect with anybody. And then you can also email me, phil@philbowdle.com.
Awesome, Phil. Man, I really appreciate your time. But I also really appreciate God using you to further his kingdom. So thanks for answering his call. I kind of laugh because I'm like, yeah, God has a sense of humor, because I didn't find myself wanting to work for a church. I wasn't a preacher's kid, but I grew up in the church. I never thought I'd work for a church, but sense of humor, God goes, no, I'm going to do this to you and change your life. And it's been awesome ever since. So I appreciate your story and thanks for your leadership.
Oh, I appreciate it. And thanks for all that you guys are doing. I mean, churches need leaders like you, podcasts like this, and people that are just here to help the church. So honored to be with you guys today.
Thanks, buddy.
Thanks, Phil.
Talk to you soon.